She didn't yell. She didn't cry. She didn't even flinch. Jenny walked into the tell-all studio in the US, alone, with the kind of silent confidence that says, I'm not waiting anymore. No dramatic breakdown, just presence. And Sumit? 15 hours behind, still back in India. If you were expecting chaos, what you got instead was something far sharper. Her calm wasn't weakness. It was the kind of calm that usually comes after someone reaches their limit and crosses it without asking for permission. Welcome to Reality Sport. I'm Oliva. If you haven't already subscribed, click that button. And tell me in the comments, was this the moment you knew the marriage was done? But to understand how we got here, you have to go back to the move that changed everything. When Sumit dragged Jenny back into his parents' house under the excuse of tradition and closeness, it wasn't about building a future. It was about staying financially comfortable and emotionally stuck without saying it out loud. They didn't just lose privacy, they lost their partnership. Jenny wasn't starting a new chapter there. She was erasing herself in someone else's story. And Sumit? He never called it control. He called it respect. Respect for rules he complained about one day, then defended the next. One moment he's saying they can't be free under mom's roof. The next he's scolding Jenny for wanting space to breathe. That's not confusion. That's convenience. It let him protect the family ties he was too scared to cut, while she absorbed the constant discomfort of never fully belonging. From the start, Sumit's promises came in installments. Each one sounded sweet, until the catch. Yes, we'll get married, but not before my parents find out the hard way. Yes, you're my wife, but privacy is optional now. Jenny gave up her home, her comfort, and her boundaries. And all he had to do in return? Keep waiting. Waiting for the right time. Waiting for their approval. Waiting for things to magically smooth over. And while she shrank bit by bit to keep the peace, he stayed right where he was, smack in the middle. Not choosing, not defending, not moving. What pushed Jenny past her quiet endurance into full independence? That moment's coming. In the house that was supposed to be their marriage home, Jenny couldn't even sit in her pajamas without someone raising an eyebrow. Not because she was doing anything outrageous, but because her body, her presence, her straightforward existence didn't fit into a household still treating her like a tolerated outsider. Something as simple as lounging in shorts? Suddenly up for family discussion. Jenny wasn't a wife anymore. She was a guest with curfews, restrictions, and zero room to breathe. And Sumit? He called it compromise. He said he needed her, loved her, couldn't imagine life without her. But when she asked for something back, just peace, privacy, a life that felt like her own, he hesitated. Every single time. His loyalty stretched miles to please his parents, but stopped short at protecting his partner. How many women watched this and felt seen? Not because they've lived in India or walked the exact same halls, but because they've been in houses, or relationships, or dynamics where their choices were taken apart by people who didn't want to understand them, but expected them to conform anyway. The issue wasn't the house rules. It was how quickly Jenny's needs were dismissed to avoid upsetting everyone else. Sumit kept calling it understanding. It looked more like emotional evasion. He said it's just temporary. But temporary turned into months. Promises turned into guilt trips. And Jenny was stuck proving herself again, after already proving that she stayed after lies, after distance, after rejection, after waiting. What Sumit labeled tradition often turned out to be a shield. A way to avoid confrontation. A way to stay in the middle zone, where he got credit for trying, without having to give up anything real. Inside the house, when Jenny asked for space, she wasn't challenging the culture. She was challenging the convenience of never choosing. There's a big difference. Still, it's easy to villainize him, but what if the issue wasn't cruelty, but comfort? Not malice, but conditioning? Sumit grew up believing harmony mattered more than honesty. that keeping things peaceful, even when it hurt someone, was somehow love. So now, when Jenny asked for clarity, it didn't sound like love to him. It sounded like conflict. He wasn't trying to control her consciously. He was just scared of what full freedom would demand from him in return. Because if Jenny no longer needed to shrink, the only one left with adjustment to make was him. The cracks were showing, but only one of them was bleeding. Why didn't Sumit see that? Love sounds poetic until the bills show up. Because when the rent's due, flowers don't pay the landlord, and patience doesn't cover groceries. Behind the emotional fights, the culture clashes, and all the tears Jenny swallowed through the years, there was something even heavier pressing on her chest. Financial dependency, the kind that traps you quietly, even when your heart is already halfway out the door. While Sumit talked about wanting freedom and new beginnings, he always made sure he wasn't footing that journey alone. Walking back into his family home wasn't just about tradition. It was about slashing costs, dodging responsibility, and leaning on a system that would shelter him if everything crashed. And Jenny, for all her independence, ended up inside a house she never owned, and a future she couldn't afford to leave. Every time she tried to take a step forward, money yanked her back like a leash. It wasn't that she still believed things would magically get better. It's that she didn't know how to start over without breaking herself financially. When you're in a foreign country, in a relationship that controls the purse strings, even buying a flight becomes an act of warfare. Enter the calf, their shiny new business project. Supposedly their lifeline, their way out, their joint dream. But in reality, that calf wasn't freedom. It was a sandcastle built in a financial storm. No stable income, no safety net, only risk disguised as opportunity. They were burning more cash than they were making, and each delay in profits tied Jenny to the situation even tighter. Don't forget, Sumit's fall had a net. Family, culture, home. Jenny's fall would be straight into the concrete. And when love becomes something you can't afford to leave, is it even love anymore? Or is it survival wearing a wedding ring? The big shock? Jenny didn't stay because she believed in him. She stayed because no one survives sudden homelessness in a country where they feel invisible. She wasn't choosing romance. She was postponing misery. And that, quietly, was one of the hardest truths to admit, to herself and to anyone watching. She didn't scream when she left. She didn't need to. Her silence said what years of maybe next month and someday soon had failed to. There's a reason she left without yelling. Calm often follows the final decision. When Jenny stepped onto American soil solo, it wasn't just about distance. It was about direction. For the first time in years, she wasn't waiting for permission. She wasn't checking if her choices fit inside someone else's comfort zone. She was home, literally and emotionally. And back in India, Sumit felt that shift like a cold gust he couldn't block out. He didn't just lose proximity. He lost control. This wasn't about drama. It was about posture. Silence used to scare Jenny. Now, it settled on her shoulders like armor. She wasn't begging to be heard anymore. She was done explaining. Count how many years she adjusted, compromised, stayed soft to keep the marriage breathing. And now, she's out. She's stable. And for once, she's standing where she won't have to negotiate her existence. Meanwhile, Sumit's left blinking in the rearview. All those years where he moved the goalposts, slowly getting married, slowly introducing her to his family, slowly giving privacy, affection, stability, suddenly caught up with him. And now that he had no more delays to throw at her, he's stuck confronting the momentum she built while he stalled. He used to pace the relationship, deciding when they'd talk, when they'd travel, when to tell his parents, when to live alone again. always in control of how fast or slow things moved, like pressing the gas and the brake at the same time. But when Jenny moved continents without warning, that grip shattered. Now, he's playing catch-up on a road she's already turned off from. And the part Sumit never calculated? When you train someone long enough to go quiet, to dim themselves down, to wait endlessly, they eventually stop needing you to change and start building a door out. America wasn't an escape. It was the first breath she'd taken that didn't require him to exhale first. There's a difference between being emotionally distant and geographically gone. Now, she was both, and the space between them wasn't filled with hope. It was filled with expectations too long unmet. Sumit looked stunned, like someone unplugged the script mid-scene. Like if he just explained one more time how complicated it all was, maybe she'd drop her bags and fly back into the fog. But the truth is, he waited too long. He mistook her quiet for softness. And now, she was quiet again. But it wasn't softness. It was clarity. The power flipped silently, and Sumit didn't even notice until it was gone. This was never just a couple arguing over whose turn it was to compromise. This was two entire belief systems trying to fold into one fragile marriage. Sumit didn't fake his loyalty to his parents. That was real. That was generational. That was wired into his identity long before Jenny ever entered the picture. But the problem wasn't his loyalty. It was how much it cost her, and how rarely he admitted the price. She didn't ask him to abandon his family. She asked him to stop making her pay for their approval. And that's where everything got tangled. Because in Sumit's world, harmony meant silence. Keeping the peace often meant keeping Jenny quiet. And in Jenny's world, that silence started to feel like suffocation. Dignity doesn't speak as loudly as tradition, but it holds longer. And when you're forced to choose between being accepted and being respected, eventually you realize acceptance with conditions isn't love. It's control, dressed in ritual. There's real emotion at the root of both sides. Sumit's parents carried fear. Fear of losing their only son. Fear of judgment. Fear of an unfamiliar path. Jenny? She carried weariness. Of always proving herself. Of stepping lightly. Of never being protected when things got hard. And Sumit stood between them, paralyzed. Not because he didn't care, but because he never learned how to care evenly. One side always came first. And Jenny always came with a delay. In many ways, this wasn't just their fight. It was every relationship where one person is stretched across duty to two worlds, and the other is slowly erased in the process. What they were trying to build wasn't simple love, it was emotional architecture. And the foundation cracked every time one person gave everything, while the other just bought a little more time. Sumit kept saying he loved her. And maybe he did, but the hard question remains. Can that love stand on its own, without the crutch of someone else's approval? Can it exist in real time, instead of in promises waiting for the right moment? Because love filtered through fear always comes diluted. And even now, as Jenny stands whole, one question still haunts the silence. Will Sumit follow her or fold? There were no explosions, no cheating scandals, no storming out or screaming matches caught on camera. That's not how this ended. If anything, Jenny's exit felt quiet, almost too quiet. And that's what made it hit so deeply. Because this wasn't a spontaneous decision. This was a long, slow erosion. 1,000 paper cuts that finally hit bone. What viewers witnessed wasn't the chaos of a relationship breaking. It was the stillness of one that already had. To really understand why Jenny left, you've got to zoom out. Years earlier, she gave everything for love that barely showed up on time. Sumit wasn't a stranger she casually met. He was the catfish who deceived her from day one. She thought she was falling in love with a man named Michael Jones, a fabricated identity built to trap attention, not earn trust. And when she found out the truth, she stayed. She could have walked away with her pride intact. Instead, she unpacked her shame and started again. This time with the real Sumit, not the fantasy. But that wasn't the final betrayal. Not even close. Public rejection followed like a shadow. The first time she came to India, his entire family rejected her existence. Then she left. Then she came back. Again, and again, and again. Each reunion was supposed to mark a new chapter, a turn toward partnership. But what she got was long delay wrapped in short bursts of affection. There were always new excuses. My parents aren't ready. The timing isn't right. Let's wait until the business is solid. Let's move in with my family. It's temporary. But eventually, Jenny stopped hearing those excuses as explanations and started seeing them for what they were: strategy. A way to delay commitment without ending it. Keep her close, but not safe, not stable, not prioritized. And still, she stayed. At some point, staying stopped meaning she was hopeful. It started to mean she was exhausted. Too much invested. Too many years poured into proving she belonged. Too many sacrifices made without receipts. Because every time Sumit made a promise and didn't deliver, something inside her dimmed. And every time she forgave him, she moved the bar lower just to make it easier for him to cross without effort. Her patience wasn't infinite. It was inherited. It was what women are taught love is supposed to look like. Endure. Hold the line. Stay even when it hurts. Especially when it hurts. But Jenny began to realize she wasn't in a love story anymore. She was in a labor contract. And her paycheck? Approval. Always pending. Never deposited. That's why the silence matters. She didn't have to scream at Sumit because he already knew. The long sighs, the tight-lipped smiles, the way she stopped asking and started informing, those were the signs. When Jenny booked that flight to America, she wasn't making a power play. She was accepting reality. She had stayed through lies, through discomfort, through a wedding that should have been triumph but felt like negotiation. She had been called desperate, judged by strangers, used as an example of misplaced loyalty. She smiled through each moment and said, "It's going to work." But hope has a limit. And when it breaks quietly, there's no putting it back. People think betrayal is loud, like furniture throwing, cheating-level drama with dramatic music cues. But sometimes betrayal is subtle. It's being invisible in your own life. It's asking your partner to defend you and watching them stay silent. It's being someone's emotional anchor, but never their full choice. Jenny didn't leave because of one final fight. She left because her heart had been exiting the relationship in small pieces for years. By the time she boarded that plane alone, what people saw as a shocking decision was actually long overdue. What's still unclear, what no camera can fully capture, is whether she left the door cracked open behind her or slammed it shut without looking back. Because here's the thing, there was no dramatic announcement, no ultimatum, just that sharp, unfamiliar calm. And when someone's finally living in peace, you better believe it took chaos to get there. Sumit might be hoping she's just taking space, that she'll text, or call, or miss him so much she folds. But he'd be underestimating the quiet kind of woman who now realizes she survived worse than leaving. She survived years of shrinking, years of waiting to be chosen loudly. And in America, for the first time, she's in a place where she doesn't have to ask for permission to exist. So, is reconciliation even on the table? Or is he clinging to a version of her that no longer exists? Sometimes the quiet exit hits harder than any fight. And for Jenny, this was all strategy, not drama. Sumit is out of road. Every delay he once leaned on like a safety rail is gone. This isn't about getting more time or pushing the hard conversations just a little further. Jenny's not standing there, waiting for the right words. She's already sitting in another country, breathing a different kind of air, one that doesn't come with strings or supervision. And now, The only thing left between them is action or silence. And if Sumit chooses silence again, the ending writes itself. This is where viewers started asking the real question. What would you do if your loyalty to your family came at the cost of your partner's entire identity? Sumit's tug of war wasn't fictional. It was painfully real. Be the son whose duty defines him, or the husband whose choices finally set his partner free. But the sad truth? By trying to have both, he risked losing both. Because guilt only carries a relationship until the person on the receiving end stops apologizing for needing more. People love throwing labels at this situation. Manipulator, coward, mama's boy. But take a breath and look harder. Sumit's not evil. He's scared. Scared of being cut off, not just from his parents, but from a version of himself that only exists when he's making everyone else comfortable. Scared that choosing Jenny loudly will mean seeing disappointment in the one place that's always dictated his worth, his home. And yet, his failure to protect Jenny already carries its own weight. Because the longer he avoided full commitment, the more he told Jenny, without saying a word, that her pain was an acceptable consequence of his comfort. He told himself he was peacemaking. But when peace is built on your partner's silence, it's not harmony. It's control with a smile. Jenny never demanded that he abandon his roots. She just wanted to know those roots wouldn't strangle their future. She wanted a husband who could stand beside her without flinching in front of his parents, who could draw a line and hold it, even when it was inconvenient. But again and again, he handed her promises with flexible expiration dates. And now, the expiration has come. With no warning, no countdown. The clock just hit 0. This is where illusion cracks. Because tradition might shield you from judgment, but it won't protect you from loneliness. You can hang on to old rules all you want, but if they cost you the person who stood by you at your worst, what's left? You don't get to keep standing at the border between two worlds and expect everyone to wait while you decide where to live. Jenny lived on that line for years. She woke up every day in someone else's country, someone else's house, trying to fit into rituals that never truly invited her in. And when adaptation becomes a requirement instead of a compromise, love stops feeling free. Sumit's dilemma goes deeper than marriage. This is an identity crisis unfolding in public. He's trying to reconcile who he was raised to be with who he now claims to love. But culture doesn't bend because love whispered its name. You have to choose. Loudly. Publicly. Without terms and conditions. And here's where things cut deep, especially for anyone watching who's ever been in a relationship with delayed commitment wrapped in uncertain loyalty. Because when your partner keeps you emotionally parked and almost, resentment builds like slow poison, even if it's dressed in kindness and distraction. Viewers watched this unfold and started picking sides. Some said Jenny should have left years ago. Others said Sumit was doing his best inside impossible cultural binds. But almost everyone agreed this, whatever it was, could not survive on stalled promises any longer. He keeps saying he loves her. But he also said he couldn't imagine turning his back on the family who never truly accepted her. So what now? If love really means choosing someone, really choosing, then how does Sumit plan to do that with one foot still in his mother's shadow? This is the critical moment. Not when vows were exchanged. Not when hugs were filmed in two tight family kitchens. But now, with miles between them and silence filling the void like smoke. Jenny's not begging. She's built her out. And Sumit either has to match her clarity with courage or be remembered as the man who waited too long to speak. He doesn't get eternity. He gets right now. Something Jenny learned during that airplane ride home is that choosing herself didn't require hurting him. It just required finally listening to the part of her that'd been whispering for years, "You deserve to breathe." And Sumit? His test isn't whether he can convince her not to leave. It's whether he can stand fully in something without shrinking when pressure shows up. Because if fear keeps driving the car, he'll never get to a love that moves. Jenny found clarity. Sumit needs courage. And the clock is out. Once all the smoke clears and the cameras get packed away, here's what sticks. This was never a story about whether Jenny and Sumit loved each other. It was a story about whether that love could survive without crutches, without guilt keeping them tethered, without control disguised as protection, without one person constantly shrinking so the other could stay comfortable. And the truth is, it couldn't. Not like that. For a long time, viewers kept asking, will they last? But that question aged badly. The better question was always, what are they surviving on? Because their foundation wasn't built on balance. It was built on hope Jenny carried alone, on culture Sumit weaponized without really meaning to, on sacrifice scaled entirely in one direction. Take a moment and track it back. Jenny met Sumit through a lie. She dug through betrayal, rejection, and public humiliation. She watched her own identity get minimized, all for a marriage that arrived years late, wrapped in more negotiation than joy. And still, she stayed. Not because she didn't see the flaws, but because underneath it all, she believed love could shapeshift into something safer, something shared. But it never did. Because love needs both people to move. And Sumit, for all his words, stayed rooted in indecision, making small steps while asking Jenny to leap entire oceans, both figuratively and literally. You have to zoom out to really feel the shift. At the start, Jenny looked like the one needing proof. The older woman in a foreign country surrounded by people who didn't want her there. But as the years went on, that setup flipped. Because she adapted. She gave up her home, her comfort, her habits, her space, her privacy. And still, she tried to be the stable half, the partner who waits, the one who forgives. And quietly, Sumit became the one with something to prove. Not just to Jenny, but to himself. Could he ever fully commit without loopholes? Here's the irony. People think love is measured by how hard you're willing to fight for it. But sometimes, love is measured by how much of yourself you're willing to stop losing just to stay in it. Jenny didn't leave because her feelings disappeared. She left because her self-worth showed up. And when it didn't ask her to hate Sumit. It asked her to remember who she was before being someone's constant compromise. That's the twist no one saw coming. If Jenny didn't love him, the decision would have been easier. But she did. She still might. And leaving someone you love, not because they hurt you, but because they never fully protected you, that's a different kind of heartbreak. So now, everything hangs in the tension of what happens next. Sumit doesn't have the luxury of delay anymore. No more next season moments. No more soon. No more retreating into family expectations when clarity gets too loud. He knows the stakes now. He knows what distance feels like when it isn't metaphorical. It's measurable in airport gates and time zones. This isn't about grand gestures or promises scribbled on postcards. This is about whether he's capable of doing, not just saying. About whether he can take what Jenny asked for all along, equal partnership, and finally deliver it without terms or timelines. Everyone watching knows what happened wasn't some dramatic explosion. It was quieter, sadder, more human. And that's why it hit harder. You don't need betrayal to feel broken. Sometimes the slow burn of being halfway chosen is worse. And Jenny? She's not coming back out of loneliness. She won't run back because he misses her. That version of her, the one who held her breath every time his family entered the room, that version's gone. What's left is someone who knows her value. And that's not something you negotiate down. If she ever comes back, it won't be because she's patient. It'll be because she saw something change. Something real. And maybe Sumit gets there. Maybe he finally realizes that being a good son doesn't have to mean being a half-present husband. Maybe he finally chooses without checking 1,000 external approval boxes before he speaks. But if he doesn't, then the story is already over. Not because there wasn't love, but because love, tall as it is, still collapses under imbalance. Love can't thrive in the waiting room of fear. And fear is exactly what's driven this marriage from day one. Love works when both people feel safe enough to be fully seen. And Jenny gave him that over and over again. Now, she's giving it to herself. And whether Sumit catches up or stays frozen, that's on him. And that leads perfectly into the next nuclear moment you missed. What Jenny did after the tell, all that changed everything. Don't blink.